Hello Year 10. Right, next little bit on our quadratics topic. You looked over the last couple of lessons at how we factorise the harder quadratics with coefficients of x squared. Next little bit is looking at how we solve them. Now we solve them no differently to how we solved quadratics that didn't have a coefficient in front of the x squared. It's exactly the same process. So if anything, this is just a little bit more practice for us. I'm going to go through a couple of examples, a couple of slightly more difficult examples as well, but it really is just a continuation on from what you did last lesson. So if we look at the first one, 2x squared plus 7x plus 5 equals 0. Remember, to solve a quadratic, it has to be an equation first of all. Okay, so it has to be an equation. Therefore, we have to have an equal sign. The other really important thing, okay, in order to solve a quadratic, if we can remember from last time, it has to equal 0. Always has to equal 0. If it doesn't, we cannot solve it. We have to manipulate it so that it will equal 0. So if we look at the first one equals 0 for us already, so we're quite happy. Same process as what you've been doing in the last couple of lessons with regards to multiply your coefficient of x squared and your coefficient without an x. Multiply those two together. So we'll do 2 times 5 to give us 10. That's the value we're going to do our factor pairs of. So positive 10, we're going to add to positive 7. So I've got 1 times 10, I've got 2 times 5. Because I want to add to 7, that's the factor pair I'm interested in. We go to our grid. Okay, 2x squared goes into the middle, 5 goes into the bottom right. We then put our 5x and our 2x into the remaining gap, so we'll have 5x and 2x. We work our way round. Now to make 2x squared, to make life a little bit easier for us, okay, 2x squared can only be made by multiplying x and 2x. So it's just going to be a case of working out which way round we want to put them. We can either put x in a row with 2x and 5x, which does work. But if we focus on the 2x, do I want it in a row with 5x along here? Or do I want it in the column with another 2x? Makes far more sense to put it in the column with 2x, because I can multiply to make 2x, than it does with the 5. Therefore, x needs to go into that gap, and we can work our way round. To make 5x, I do x times 5. 5, to get to 5, I times by 1. And check your last one. 2x times 1 gives me 2x. Same as before, top row, first column, come down to make my brackets. So I'll have 2x plus 5, x plus 1. Now we've factorised, solving is exactly the same process as it was before. We take each bracket, we set each bracket equal to 0, and we solve them. So, got to do a little bit of balancing. So subtract 5 from both sides because I've got a positive 5. So 2x will equal negative 5. Divide both sides by 2. X equals minus 5 over 2, we'll leave it as a fraction, much easier as a fraction. This one, much simpler, just subtract 1 from each side. So we end up with x equals 5 over 2, minus 5 over 2 even, and x equals minus 1. So up to this point is exactly what you did last lesson. And then this last bit here is what we did earlier on in the week when we were just focusing on quadratics without a coefficient of x squared. But it is the same process. Set each bracket equal to 0 and solve. Okay. More than anything, guys, this is just a practice of factorising. It's just got the extra step on the end. Solving these quadratics becomes so important later on in the course. Okay, just going to show you a couple more examples. So, 2m squared plus 6m plus 2 equals m plus 5. Now, if we remember back to the top, one of the key things we needed was it had to be equal to 0. Now, this quadratic, currently this equation is not equal to 0. Therefore, I need to balance it so that it will be equal to 0. So, I'm going to split my equation down the middle and I'm going to balance it. So I need to get rid of an m. M at the moment is positive, so I'm going to subtract an m from both sides. So I end up with 2m squared plus 6m take away m gives me 5m plus 2 equals 5. And then I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides because the 5 is positive as well. 2m squared plus 5m, 2 take away 5 gives me minus 3 equals 0. So this is now the new equation I am working with. Okay, this is the quadratic I'm now going to solve. And I follow the same process as I did last time. What I want you to do now, I want you to pause the video and I want you to now solve that quadratic as we did above. Pause the video. If you need to rewind and rewatch it quickly, absolutely fine. But I want you to complete solving that quadratic now for me. Okay, right. Let's have a look then. So, 2m squared plus 5m minus 3. Same first step as always. Multiply your coefficient of m squared in this sense. It makes no difference that it's m rather than x. And your coefficient without a value. So, we're going to do 2 times by negative 3 to give me negative 6. So I'm after factor pairs of negative 6. Because it's a negative, I need one positive and one negative when I multiply. So I'm going to double up my factor pairs. So I have minus 1 and 6, 1 and minus 6, minus 2 and 3, 2 and minus 3. Now I'm after the ones that add to 5. So it's it could actually be any of them, but the ones that are going to add to positive 5, it's going to be out of those two. To give me positive 5, I'm going to use the top one there because 6 and a negative 1 gives me 5 overall. So we're going to go across to our grids again. We're going to put our 2m squared in the middle. Remember, we are looking at this equation. We're not going back to the top. We're just focusing on that equation now. Put our minus 3 in. Put in our minus m this time and 6m. By all means, guys, change it to x if you need to. If it makes it easier, just change this to 2x squared plus 5x minus 3. It's exactly the same thing. It's just a different letter. Same as before. To make 2m squared, only one way of doing it, which is to multiply 2m and m. So just work out where to put your 2m. Always focus on the bigger one first. It does make life a bit easier. So, do I put 2m squared in here with a minus m? Well, that's not particularly easy to multiply 2m to make a minus m. I'd have to divide instead. Whereas if I put it into that gap, to get from 2m to 6m is much, much easier. So, we'll put 2m in that one and m in that one, and we work our way round. M to negative n are times by negative 1. Negative 1 to negative 3 are times by 3. Check your last box. 2m times by 3 makes my 6m that I'm after. Okay. Happy with that? Take my top row, take my first column. So I have 2m minus 1, m plus 3 equals 0. Set both brackets equal to 0. So 2m minus 1 equals 0. M plus 3 equals 0. So, to balance my equation, I'm going to add 1 to both. So I'll have 2m equals 1. Divide both by 2. M equals a half. This one, just going to subtract 3 off both sides. So I have m equals a half. And m equals negative 3. Same process we've always done. There will sometimes be some of this manipulation we have to do because it has to equal 0. Okay, always got to equal 0 quadratics for us to be able to solve them. Okay, now I'm just going to show you a couple more examples. Get a little bit tougher, but again, it's just the manipulation at the start. That's the only bit that's different. Okay, so just going to move this one down a little bit so we've got a bit more space. As well. So, next one, 3x squared plus x plus 2 equals 3 brackets x plus 1. Now the brackets is new, okay? Whenever you see a bracket, we should hopefully be thinking about, right, I've got a bracket there. First thing I need to do is make sure I expand it, okay? I don't want brackets in this because I'm going to put it back into brackets to factorise it. But I need to get rid of those brackets first. So I expand, okay? Now we've done some expansion this year. Remember, fall back if we need it. We go back to our grid to expand. A grid helps us factorise, a grid helps us expand. Okay, 3 times x is 3x, 3 times 1 is 3. So that goes to 3x plus 3. Okay, so that means I can take this down now, and this is now 3x squared plus x plus 2 equals 3x plus 3. We're now back in the same position as we were back on this one. All we've got to do is balance the sides. Okay, make sure it equals 0. Right, again, pause the video. I want you to balance it to make 0 and then solve the equation for me. So pause now, balance it to make 0 first of all, then solve the equation. Okay then guys, right, let's have a look. So, should have balanced it first of all. So, if I'm thinking about balancing, I need to get rid of the 3x first. So I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. So subtract 3x from that side, subtract 3x from this side. So I'm going to end up with 3x squared minus 2x, because x take away 3x gives me my negative 2x, plus 2 equals 3. And then I'll subtract 3 from both sides. 3x squared minus 2x minus 1 equals 0. Okay, that's what we should have got when we balanced. That's the first bit done. Okay, next bit we need to look at is we now need to think about solving. We've got a coefficient of x squared times your coefficient of x squared by your value without an x. So we'll go 3 times negative 1 to be negative 3. That's the factor pairs we're looking at. Factor pairs of a negative means we need one positive and one negative, and we're going to have to double up our factor pairs. Because we can have minus 1 and 3, 1 and minus 3. Nice and simple for this one, not too many factor pairs at all. The ones that add to negative 2 is going to be that pair there, because we've got 1 take away 3 would give us negative 2. So we head back to our grids again. Make sure you are focusing on the correct equation. You want the one that is equal to 0. So we'll go 3x squared into the middle, minus 1 to the bottom right. We then put our factor pairs we've just found in, so we'll have a minus 3x and a 1x, and we work out what's missing. To make 3x squared, the only way I can make 3x squared is by multiplying x and 3x. So work out where I want my 3x to be. That's the bigger one, that's the more difficult one to place. Do I want it in a column with a 1x, or do I want it in a row with a minus 3x? Far more sense to put it into that place there, much easier, and we can put our x in. 3x to minus x are times by minus 1. Minus 1 to minus 1 are times by 1. Check your remaining 1. 1 times x is 1x. Happy with that? Take your top row, take your first column, and they become our brackets. X minus 1, 3x plus 1 equals 0. Just got to finish it off now. So all we need to do, set both brackets equal to 0. So we'll have, so we can have x minus 1 equals 0. And we can have 3x plus 1 equals 0. So x will equal 1. This one just requires a little bit more balancing. So we'll subtract 1 from both sides. 3x equals negative 1. Divide both sides by 3. X equals minus a third. And there are two solutions we should have got. Okay, hopefully we are getting some success with this, guys. Okay. I'm getting steadily more difficult with these examples just to cover all the work you're doing. The bit that I'm really want people to focus on is just from this piece onwards, okay? Making sure we can do from the quadratic equal to 0, we can then solve.